Hi, I'm Cameron, and I don't just read comics, I love them. Welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. And today I didn't think I wanted to go over a single issue or a series that I read or a trailer reaction or whatever I usually do. I think I kind of wanted to start a new series, and this is actually going to be inspired by some news that happened recently. And I thought that we should talk about it. I think this is something that's worthy to be talked about, and that's George Perez coming out with a statement saying he has terminal cancer. He has about 6 months to a year to live, and while he's an older artist, he defined a generation. I just think that it's something worth talking about, and I think while he's still alive and while he can still see this, I want to put out my love for what he did. And so today I just kind of wanted to put a spotlight on George Perez and kind of his career and what he did that influenced the medium so much. I think one of the biggest things to be said, one of the most important things to be said is that George Perez, I think, belongs on the Mount Rushmore of comic book creators. When it comes to visually defining characters or visually defining his generation, I think he is responsible. I think his influences on the industry itself changed everything. And I think that modern comics are still imitating things that he did and things that he brought to the table because he's that great. I looked up some of his Wikipedia stuff, and I kind of looked up his influence just to see and speak to it, because I've read a lot of George Perez's stuff, and I just only applaud what he's doing or what he has done, because he's just that monumental. I think there's certain names that in the comics industry, obviously Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, I'd say Neil Adams, and I'd put George Perez up there with his contributions, and even there's some contributions that he brought to the table that I didn't even know about. So let's just go through it. So obviously there's some major character arcs that he worked on. First one I think of is Wonder Woman, because I read the Wonder Woman by George Perez Omnibus Volume 1 a long time ago, and the footprints on that issue that defined an entire generation's depiction of Wonder Woman are undeniable. I think we have a Wonder Woman film too, in fact, because of what George Perez did to and for that character. The entire depiction of Themyscira and her being Greek and all these things. I knew she was always influenced by the gods, but to see so tangibly his influence in that. I think also the cover of Wonder Woman #1 is George Perez's Wonder Woman #1 is one of my favorite comic book covers of all time, and that just needs to be said because I think it's a wraparound cover too, and it's just one of the most beautiful images I've ever seen, and I just can't get over. I just want so many people to know about it. Him and his influence with Ares and making Ares such a terrifying figure. Yes, that was Len Wein. Yes, there was other people going in, but I think I give artists all the credit these days for the words, but I think that artists give them their faces, and I think the way George Perez brought those to the table were so distinctive, and so I think the faces that George Perez gave us were so distinct and so influential. Wonder Woman is a huge part of that. Then the next one for DC is super obvious if I haven't said it already, but it's the New Teen Titans. His run with Marv Wolfman on the New Teen Titans are, again, generation defining. The Teen Titans, as we know and love them today, are responsible and brought to us because of that series, because of what he did. That series is also, I don't know if I've stressed enough, just I've said a lot about his influence, but also just the beauty and the time that goes into his art and how literally so, I guess, proper it is. I think that what he brought to the table and still brings to the table is wonderful. So literally characters like Cyborg, Starfire, Beast Boy, Raven, those are the first ones that come to my head. those are all because of him and Marv Wolfman. And those are the Titans that we know and love as well, that are still in that title and still have influence and are now on the big screen and everywhere around pop culture. That is because of George Perez and what he brought to the table. And same with Marv Wolfman. Like those two together. And there's going to be more about them on this list, but I think George Perez, it's you can't argue how much he had to do with everything that happened in that run. So, and the way that he visually told those stories in Teen Titans are like Deathstroke and like so many. It's amazing. Then he had a couple great runs on Avengers. I think with Avengers and in his Marvel work, what stuck out to me the most was, visually, obviously, like how he portrayed each Avenger with their own unique look, and especially after like so many takes of those characters. You have Jack Kirby's Avengers, you have Roger Stern's, you have John Burns, you have like so many, Neil Adams, you have so many like influences on that team. But I think that no other artist would be the correct artist to do a book like JLA Avengers. That eventually happened. I think is written by Kurt Busiek. It had George Perez there too. Oh my gosh! Like even today, you're gonna twist my arm to convince me there's another artist that can do that so properly. Like even today, I don't know if I could think of a better artist than George Perez to do that. And then we have how much justice he did that title. I mean, like we didn't deserve. It's like George Perez on JLA Avengers. It's like describing Phil Collins on the Tarzan soundtrack. It is just, he didn't need to go that hard for us, but he did. And he did those characters justice, and he did an event like that justice. So I needed to talk about. He has some beautiful, beautiful fundamental work on Superman, and you can't look past it. Like I think the image that sticks out to me so much is when he redid the cover of Superman #1, and I think it was Action Comics. One of the most beautiful pieces of art I've ever seen, and one of the most like proper, beautiful Superman pieces I think that exists. And again, like he just had this way of taking classic art and making it modern and touching it up, but enhancing it all around. And not to say that the old art was lacking, but the way that he can bring that back to life in a new way with the same characters is unparalleled. The two biggest titles I wanted to talk about, though, were, well, I guess there's three. The two ones I think are the most influential and are still just have their fingerprints all over modern comic industry are Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Infinity Gauntlet. There's literally no other artist that could have done those books. And talk about multiversal implications and everything. I think because of those two books, we have event titles. Everyone's pumping out events these days because of these two uber monumental successful events. And look who is at the helm of both of those. Look no further than George Perez for that. Because, oh my gosh, like those... I'm sure if you have read those events, and if you haven't, I highly recommend you do. There's no Avengers Infinity War, no Avengers Endgame without George Perez and Jim Starlin's Infinity Gauntlet. That series is so beautiful, and there's panels ripped straight out of their run and that were duplicated. And obviously a lot of comic book movies do that, but I think the fact that it was George Perez it enhances that whole experience. And so I wanted to bring that to the attention of people and make note of that because it's so important. And then Crisis on Infinite Earths. DC has been trying to replicate that event with every other Crisis since, and I don't think they've gotten close, but I don't think they'll ever match the power of that event. And there's so many panels and pages that they try and replicate in modern art that get redone or inspired by or whatever. Like we see it in the television universes, we see it in the movies, we see it all over. And so a man with such a legacy in DC Comics, I think it's so special. It should be honored and it should be celebrated. George Perez is one of the most influential artists in the medium, and he deserves to be celebrated. And so while he's still alive, we must let him know that, hey, let me say it now, George Perez, your art changed my life. And I mean that. And thank you for your contributions. The video's not ending yet because I want to end on a fun fact. And this one was really what sealed the deal. Was like, okay, everything I just listed of what he did that, I'm most familiar with his work, I can speak to. But then when I found this out, it actually blew my mind. George Perez wasn't the artist on this book, but he was the inker for Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which is arguably one of, if not the most successful Superman stories of all time. It's like, what would Superman's final tale be? It's written by Alan Moore, art by the most influential Kurt Swan, arguably the greatest Superman artist of his generation. I'd say George Perez is the spiritual successor of Kurt Swan, and I think that's a very realistic and honest answer. And if you don't know what Kurt Swan's Superman looks like, I highly recommend you go check it out. But for that title, one of the most magnificent, George Perez did the inks over, which is like, okay, so it had two powerhouses on that book, and Alan Moore and Kurt Swan, but for George Perez to have participated in that book makes so much sense if you already look at how much he's done for the industry. So that's what I got to learn from George Perez. Like, wow, like, you are so much grander than I had ever thought. So, George, if you're watching this, thank you for everything you've given this industry, for what you've given myself and a million other fans just like me, the comic book marketplace and the industry, and now the pop culture sphere is going to be a lot different without you in it. But it's so much better than it could have been because you were in it. So thank you. We love you. Go check out some of the stuff I was talking about for the fans, and make sure to clap with those like and subscribe buttons. Maybe drop a comment and tell me what your favorite George Perez piece of work is. Remember, I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them.